Hi. In this video, I show one way to create a simple R package that includes C++ codes, how to test these codes, and what my usual development workflow is. First, we need the following packages. DevTools, use this, Rcpp, and testthat that can be installed by running this line of code. Next, we're going to clear the default directory by running remove list equal ls. And finally, we are ready to use this, create package. We're gonna assign a path to the package. In this example, I'm gonna use the desktop and a name to the package, and I'm gonna use my R package. The previous line of code opens a new instance of RStudio inside the R project associated to our package, my rpackage.rproj. Under files, here on the right, you can see the initial package structure. And the first thing that we do is modify the description file by setting a title, providing information on the authors of the package, write a one-paragraph description of what the package does, and importantly, choose a license. In this example, I'm going to use the GPL3 license by using this function, use GPL3 license. As you can see, the license has been set to GPL version greater or equal to 3. Next, we are going to add some R code simply by navigating to the R folder, creating a new R script, or by typing use R and providing a name, for instance, code.r, which will create the file code.r. And in here, we can paste this function that I created, which takes two inputs and produces the sum of the two inputs as a return value. This is the way you would document such function. @param is used to document the arguments, and @return documents the return value. Finally, we add this @export to those functions that we want to have available once we load our package. Now we can document our package by simply running Command Control Shift D, save selected, which will create the documentation by adding this man folder with the documentation of all the functions and codes. And we can load also by running Command Control Shift L. Similarly, we can use DevTools, document this function to create all the documentation, or load all function to load all the functions in the package. And we can use the functions, for instance, add integers. If we use 2 and 2, we obtain 4. And we can also obtain the help, !add integers r. And this will render on the right here under the help, the documentation that we provided to the function. In order to enable RCPP, we run use Rcpp function. If you know that you want to use Armadillo or Eigen, which are C++ linear algebra libraries, you can use one of these two functions instead. When we run this function, this will create under files in a new folder, source, where we are going to store the C++ codes. It creates this code.cpp directly, where we can create our functions. And it asks you to copy and paste the following lines of code into the file my rpackage-package.r, which is not there already. So you need to create it. And this is done by running use package doc. This creates this file here, and we are going to copy and paste the aforementioned lines of code. One. Now we can go back to our source folder, code.cpp file. We can copy and paste this function, which is the same function as before, just the C++ version, which takes two inputs, A and B, that are integers, and return an output that is the integer sum of them. We can save, and we can document our package and load. Now this function will be available. We use it on 2 and 2, we get 4. And we also get the helper in here. If you're using Armadillo or Eigen, you need to replace this line of code, this header include codes, with the corresponding header, for instance, rcpp armadillo.h for armadillo, or eigen for eigen. And this rcpp depends rcpp armadillo or eigen for eigen, which will substitute this line of code. Next, we are going to enable testing by running use testthat 3, meaning the version 3. This will create a new folder, tests. Inside tests, there will be this R file, which should be ignored, and this folder, testthat. And inside here, we should put the R code that produces the tests for our R and C++ functions. And the organization of this folder should resemble the ones inside the R folder. So, for instance, we should add a file called test-code.r, which contains all the tests to be performed on the functions inside code.r and code.c++. So you could either create this file yourself or use test, and then the name of the file, so with the same name as the one in the R folder, which will create this file, test-code.r, in which we are ready to write, for instance, a test for add integers R. For instance, we can use an expect equal test in which we ask add integer applied to 2 and 2 to match 4, which is exactly the result that we expect. And we can do the same for the C++ version of the function. If we want to include our tests, we can do it in the body of the function. We can save, and in order to run these tests, we can either test that test file and then run this function on this one file, which will run all the tests contained in that file, or Command-Control-Shift-T for testing, which again will produce all the tests. As you can see, 0 fail, 0 warning, 0 skip, and 2 pass, which are the ones corresponding to these 2 tests that we created. Data can be added by using useData. For example, let's create a data frame by simply sampling 1000 observations. Then we provide a column name, col1. And finally, once we have some data in our environment, we can store it by using useData, and then the name of the data frame here. This creates the data folder containing our RDA file, and also it introduces lazy data true in our description file. If you have some raw unprocessed data that you want to save, you can use data raw, which will create the corresponding folder, data raw. Finally, data should be documented. To do so, you document the name of the dataset in the folder R. To do so, use R, and we add my data, which is the name of our dataset, .r. So we create this new file in here in R, and we document by using this format. Then we can document by running Command-Control-Shift-T. This will add the documentation of the data in here, in man for manual. One can then use my data to see the documentation of the data frame. Finally, my workflow is I usually modify my R or C++ codes. And then what I often do is load the functions and test them. And sometimes I run the entire documentation, the testing, then I build my library, and finally I load the functions.